Alrighty, so you want to get a Rule 40 or above in English language, maybe a Rule 45, maybe even a Rule 50. Well, this essay examples folio is perfect for you. This is going to be a very short and sharp set of guides that walk you through 22 pre-prepared, analyzed contemporary examples from the media from 2025, perfect for just copying, remembering, and regurgitating onto that exam if you need to at the end of the year in October. Let's get into it one by one. First of all, we've got Michael Sukar's financial jargon. He's talking to the shadow housing minister. We've got the meta language terms. We've got the example. We've got the quote. And then we've got the bulk of the analysis, as well as all the tags of the different types of essay prompts this could work for. And not to mention the actual link to the source. So, of course, here Michael Sukar uses dense financial jargon, such as affordable housing bond aggregator and returns from the stock market, which function as this linguistic strategy to show his authority, his expertise, right? And again in English language, we see this attempt of authority and expertise. Now, that could be about his identity. We could talk about how people might feel in terms of their attitudes to this. We could talk about the variations in overt and covert attitudes towards Michael Sukar's financial jargon. All right, next up, we've got the Lulu with no Salulu, this age-based language, this teen identity from a YouTube short interview from February 2025 with an adjectival phrase that describes themselves as delusional with no solution, right? And the real meta language of it all is right here. We've got the example quote. And so this rhyming neologism, this new kind of phrasing, these new words show their identity and their ages. We can talk about covert norms here. We can talk about how it's on social media. So the setting and the context allows for this type of language without people judging. Whereas, of course, this type of language might not be respected or accepted if it was on the news in a very formal setting. And again, we come back to that kind of premise of formality and that stringency and that kind of strictness that we care about in English language, right? And you can talk about the cultural undercurrent of tall poppy syndrome, where they love self-deprecating themselves. They show that they're self-aware. They show that they're not perfect, right? Beautiful. And these are all the essay prompts that it works for. Alrighty, example number 3 for English Language 2025. We've got International Women's Day campaign called Accelerating Action from SBS, of course, linked here. These are all the prompts that it works for. We've got an alliterated verb phrase, accelerate action, and it functions as this imperative slogan which encapsulates this urgency, momentum, this need for egalitarianism and social progress, right? Again, we're looking at these factors of identity in terms of being Australian and what it means to be egalitarian, but also our attitudes towards this type of language about feminism and women in Australian cultural coverage. So yes, it's an Australian government website or news channel, but it's in Indonesian as well. And then they've got an English section for everybody else that might not understand. Right? And she's a CEO. This woman is a CEO. So you might even talk about her role, her prestige, and her expertise as a CEO. Alrighty. Now, example 4 for English Language 2025's exam, right? For the essay, we've got European wasps terrorize regional Victoria. It's a present tense verb. It carries severe negative connotation. It's charged. It evokes fear, urgency, danger. And these are all the prompts that it works for. We've got it linked here. So just think about how a newspaper might use this type of language in Australia to motivate human beings, motivate Australians to support their fellow Australians, right? It's a public nuisance. It's a public threat. They're terrorizing farmers, the general public, and so on and so on and so on. They're looking for help. They're looking for support, right? And it also legitimizes the topic as newsworthy. So we can talk about the attitudes that people might hold toward such strong, urgently connoted language, right? Beautiful. Now, example 5 of English Languages 2025 VCE exam. Let's have a look. So, how students prefer chill teachers in informal school settings, right? So there's an anonymous survey which we held at englangpro.com. We asked Australian students to provide informality in school context examples. And a recurring theme is that students feel far more comfortable using informal language with quote-unquote chill teachers, or especially young graduates or those who they might have close rapport with. Right? We've got colloquial adjective, we've got in-group language, and there's a whole lot of analysis here, colloquial adjective, so on, which you can use. It talks about in-group, talks about identity. There's a whole lot there for you. Now, example number 6 of English Languages VCE 2025 exam. We've got the Liberal Party slogans. Now, this example is particularly useful because it has phonology, right? We've actually got specific phonemes with IPA referencing. We talk about plosive sound, rhetorical language, metaphor, rhyme, even idioms. There's a heap of high-level analysis here. And we talk about these words and how it's impactful to use these specific phonemes in these specific ways to achieve certain outcomes. We always want to talk about that end goal. We care about that. So this selection of these phonemes is very useful in this political setting, potentially in the campaign for the election, because it's powerful when you say p or k, right? Alrighty. Now, the 7th example for VCA English Languages 2025 exam. Alice Springs street signs going back to First Nations people's language. We've got a bunch of meta language here. And think about the power of reclaiming that street sign and reverting it back to that native indigenous language of that area, right? A heap of analysis, a heap of, assessment on the attitudes around it, the First Nations person identity as part of the Australian identity holistically, overt ideals, covert ideals, what comes to mind? And these are all the essay prompts that it works for. Now, example number 8 of the English Language VCE 2025 exam, the Chinaman Lane naming controversy. A bunch of streets in Australia are called Chinaman's Lane, which, of course, is considered a racial slur. And so it's sparked outrage, debate. And so we talk about that, we discuss that. You can use it in any essay about taboo language, attitudes, identity, public-facing language, prestige. It's a dysphorism, it's historical, standard, non-standard. So there's general, racial generalizations. There's standing up to councils, outdated norms, overt or covert, these ideas coming into play again and again. Alrighty, example number 9 of English Language VCE's 2025 exam. We've got Sky News commentator Kel Richards, who published an editorial claiming that the Welcome to Country ceremonies are quote-unquote racist to the core. Right? Again, these attitudes to language, attitudes to change. Are we egalitarian or are we not? Maybe on the outside, we love progression. But on the inside, we're still prejudicial. We're still conservative, right? Let's talk about that duality, that battle between left and right, conservatism and progression, right? So the Black Lives Matter movement, there's a bunch of meta language, a bunch of analysis here. And of course, you can access this example with the link in the description. Now, we've got the Italian brain rot memes and the cultural mockery, right? Example number 10 of the English Language VC exam, which you can access with the link in the description. We've got all the Bambini Guzzini, the Ballerina Cappuccina, and this Joe Caruso, who, very much criticizes this example and is quite offended by it as an Australian Italian with the given Ethnolect that he chooses to use. I've even got a linguist opinion in this analysis, a bunch of meta language, the link to it. Of course, you can access this in the description. Now, we've got example number 11 of VCE English Languages 2025 essay examples. So this one's about Meta, so the Facebook and Instagram companies policy shifting against LGBTQ plus members. You can access this example in the link in the description. A bunch of meta language. Of course, there's a quote here. We talk about Chelsea Morgan, a transgender artist, who discusses the fragility of transgender rights when we kind of, dehumanize them in discourse, and we talk about excluding them online or not, attending to vulnerable minority groups' needs emotionally with our language use. Are we egalitarian? Are we not? On the outside, on the inside, overt, covert? You have to tell me in your essay. Alrighty, now, example number 12 of English Language 2025's VCE essays, which you can access in the link in the description, where we reframe January 26th as Invasion Day instead of Australia Day again and again in January 2025 from the SBS. Momentum is gaining for changing Australia Day every single year to Invasion Day or Survival Day. Of course, we want to reframe it, right? We want to reject the euphemism. We want to talk about the cultural semantics behind it, how we can build solidarity and pay greater respect if we call it Invasion Day. A bunch of meta language. Think about the overt, covert, prestige settings, the norms. What do we care about? What does it show about us as Australians? Essays are all about society's perception and opinions on our language use in Australia and our cultural development and evolution. Now, on to example number 13 of VCE's English language exam examples for the essays, which you can access in the link in the description. We've got federal grants to revive Indigenous languages in schools. As you can see, Albanese government in April announced $11 million to teach Indigenous languages in schools, right? We've got a bunch of meta language. I want you to think about what that means about us as a culture, as a country, as a society, our ideals, the way we think, the way we live, what we want to value progressing in the future, right? Think about how that closes a lot of the gap and how it benefits First Nations peoples culturally, and how it almost, I guess, establishes social harmony and greater peace with institutional support. A bunch of analysis there, and the tags for all the essay essay prompts that it works for. Good luck. Now, example number 14 of the VCE English Language VCA essay, which is pre-prepared, pre-packaged. You can access it in the link in the description. With a coalition, this political party pledges National Child Sex Offender Register, because we apparently don't have one for some reason. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about opposition leader Peter Dutton in the campaign in April of 2025, talking about a necessary step for transparency so that we know who the threats in our society are who have, predated on children. Now, there's a declarative there. There's a bunch of meta language there, a heap of analysis and how it's serious. There's urgency, verbs like protect, support, and punish, right? And all of the essay prompts that it works for. Think about why society might value something like this. Think about how it could, fulfill Peter Dutton's identity as well as Australian attitudes towards language, right? Next, we've got example number 15 of VCE VCA English Languages essay on the exam, which you can use with the link in the description below. In The Guardian, there was a wedding with language as a social filter about plus-sized people. And so people rejected the film because the protagonist was quote-unquote overweight, right? We've got the meta-language terms. We want to think about Australian attitudes and values and how this is not very egalitarian, and yet we still can criticize and use our language and our opinions to express disdain, right? There's a bunch of analysis, the dysphomistic language, the prestige context, the overt, the covert. We want to think about the attitudes, identity, the overt norms, the standard versus non-standard. There's a lot to discuss. Good luck. Now, example number 16 of the VCE VCA English Language exam for the essays, which you can access with the link below. This one's about national identity on Anzac Day. Now, we've got April 2025. Peter Dutton gave a speech. In this speech, he used the quote that it's a day of national unity. It almost echoed the sentiment saying, we come together to honor sacrifice. Now, a lot of people criticized it, people were upset, and some people supported it. We want to look at both ends of this equation, as you can see. These are all the essay prompts that it works with. Feel free to use it. Think about the values in Australia, our attitudes, what we prestige, what we value, our overt, our covert norms, expectations, the setting that it's in, what that means, right? Alrighty, now we've got example number 17 of VCE English Languages essay exam example, which you can access with the link in the description below. In April 2025, VCA was under fire. They made huge mistakes last year in the VCE exams, right? But they used agentless passive voice to say, hey, mistakes were made. But they didn't use active voice, and they also made it agentless. They didn't tell us who made the mistake because they're trying to avoid assigning direct blame to themselves. How is that strategic? What does it do for that institution? How might Australians think about that? It's manipulative. It's obfuscatory. Why is that bad? Why do we not value that in our society, in Australia, overtly, covertly? And these are all the essay prompts that it works for with the link right here. Now, we've got example number 18 for VCE English Language Essays for the 2025 VCA exam. In May of 2025, this example was on ABC News about embracing bilingual education at homes. And this is Bahasa, which I believe is the Indonesian language, with a parent remarking, we always say time for makan instead of dinner, right? Which is how they keep their second language alive. It's about code switching, Ethnolects, cultural transmissions, covert prestige. We want to think about how multicultural and diverse Australia is and what we value and what we care about, right? So the thing is, Australia is not merely this, uni-ethnic nation, mono-ethnic nation. We're very diverse. Let's talk about it overtly, covertly. What do we value? Do we care? Do we value bilingualism, right? And these are all the prompts that it could work for, plus far more. Now, we've got example number 20 of the VCE English Language exam for 2025, where you can use this example in the essay with the link in the description below. Now, here there's a legalese register. The Australian Human Rights Commission says hate crimes will now be prosecuted as standalone offences. Now, of course, there's a heap of nominalization. There's agentless passive voice. They don't say who's going to prosecute you. You just will be prosecuted. Wow, isn't that scary? Isn't that suspenseful? Isn't that threatening? Think about why that would be useful. There's an abstract noun, there's an institutional preference. Why would they have done that? There's a societal attitude shift directly linked to Unit 4, right? And these are all the essay prompts that it works for. Access it in the link in the description below. Now we've got example number 21 of the VCE 2025 English Language exam for the essays, which you can use. Look, pre-analyzed and packaged. You can access it in the link below. The Guardian talked about an app called Red Note, which was fear-mongering, right? And they were disinforming us about these Chinese Australian communities that they, trying to convince people that they were wicked and they were going to destroy and so on and so on. Think about how dangerous that is. Think about how Australians might feel about that, overtly and covertly, given our egalitarian ideals and the power of language to manipulate perception, to create discrimination and demarcate boundaries between human beings. And these are all the prompts that it works for. Now, finally, we've got example number 22 for the 2025 VCA English Language exam for section C, the essay. You can access this on the link in the description. We've got Kate Burridge and Language Change talking about this perceived Americanization of Australian language, right? We're being influenced to use the suffix IZE instead of ISE. We're accepting these words. It's a natural evolution, or should we hold on to it with linguistic nationalism? Right? These are some idioms. There's a variety of a general shift, new linguistic norms, expectations, adaptations, language loss, and these are all the prompts that it works for. Good luck.